So, oh, hold on. I gotta hit got it. Okay. So what we do with the IUL is if the absolute focus is maximizing the cash value, that means we need to minimize the death benefit, right? Because we can make a blend of both, but what I always recommend doing is why don't we start at the bare bones minimum death benefit, because we can only go up from there, right? You can't go less than a minimum death benefit for a given amount of premium, but you can go up. So what I'm going to show you is how I would start this illustration. Now, I'm assuming this $1,000 was in here before because this is her budget. Are we looking at $1,000 a month premium?
Yeah, so I was looking at an executive bonus of about $12,500 to $15K.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So go ahead and just stick with the even $1,000 a month for now.
Yes.
Okay. Now you'll notice under our face drop down, you can do input, maximum, minimum, percent of target, or minimum non-MEC. Minimum non-MEC is a very popular starting point for a death benefit because what the software is going to do is give her the minimum death benefit for the given amount of premium that you input. Now, we have a couple of different ways we can do this. I'm going to go ahead and start and leave this little radio button on option A. Option A, B, and C, those are three different ways we can build the death benefit. We can have a level death benefit, which is option A. We could have an increasing death benefit that increases by the cash value each year, that's B, or we could have an increasing death benefit that increases by the premium, that's option C. We're going to start at A just because it's a good, we can do all three, but I'm just going to show you option A for right now.
Okay.
Then you're going to notice there's two other radio buttons. There's GPT and there's CVAT. These are two different ways of the taxation code, making sure that this qualifies for life insurance. So GPT is the guideline premium test. It's defaulted. It happens to be the most popular that we have. CVAT is the cash value accumulation test. This, again, being a tax person yourself, these are going to be the IRS, and tax code guidelines that dictate that we're not giving too much cash value for a said death benefit. Because way back when, there used to be a whole different structure on how much cash you could put into life insurance contracts. People were advertising it as a tax loophole, and the IRS in all of their infinite wisdom was like, well, maybe we need to do something about that. So, back in the 80s, there was a lot of taxation laws passed that changed how taxation and buildup works on these contracts. So that's why, for now, I'm just going to leave it at GPT. I'm going to leave the face amount at minimum non-MEC, and I'm going to keep your $1,000 a month. Now, the only thing I would do different is I doubt you want this payable to age 100. This is how long you want the premium payable until. Typically with something like a 162, we're probably looking at age 65. Do you have a different thought on that one, Ros?
No.
Okay, then I'm going to stick with age 65. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to back up a little bit because
you betcha.
I am using this for Sanaya as a tax strategy. So you said something that I didn't hear before in terms of the executive bonus. So I just wanted to make sure that that we had the correct box checked in this in this example.
That's why we do minimum non-MEC. Yes, that's why we have minimum non-MEC. That's because the MEC guidelines, those are the things that if you violate the MEC premium guidelines, that will cause the contract to be a modified endowment contract. That's where it basically takes what would normally be tax-free distributions and it would make them taxable. Now, if you ever have a client, Ros, where it's just death benefit only and they don't really need it for accessing cash value, don't hesitate to make a contract a modified endowment. It's still a tax-free death benefit regardless of its being a MEC or not. So if you have a client that just wants to leave money to their bennies, it doesn't matter if it's a MEC. You could violate those 7-pay guidelines. And my point on that is you could, lump some in some higher premium amounts and not worry about the MEC test. So, but since you told me this is for, income planning, we're obviously going to keep it as a non-MEC.
Okay. Is there any guidance you have on that minimum non-MEC? Is there something in the portal that I could read further into that?
We build it into, that's why this is part of our software, where the death benefit, you can ask for it to stay a non-MEC. There is a little bit of verbiage on the illustration itself I can show you when we populate this. There is a MEC section. As far as true information on it, I would just go to TaxFacts and just search for modified endowment contract, and you can read the section in the tax code. That seems like something you might be interested in. Me personally, no, that sounds horrendously painful. But if you want to look at the tax, just look for modified endowment contract, and that will lead you to that section.
Okay, thank you.
You betcha. Yeah, anytime somebody's like, can I read something about that? I'm like, ooh, that sounds painful. Here's your cover page.
Rosaline's an accountant, though. That's her.
I know. That's why I said, I'm like, I could never do it. But there is a little section. Let's see here. I'm not going to read it right now, but there is a section. Did I go right past it? There's a little bit in here about MECs. So it's right in this section on what page am I on? 10 of 20.
Well, I'm looking here with the federal income tax considerations. So I caught that really fast.
Yep. So what we're looking at here is an actual illustration for a minimum non-MEC death benefit level, which is the 655. You'll see that right here in the upper right-hand corner. We're doing the $1,000 a month, and there's your $12,000 annual outlay.
Okay.
This I just had payable to age 65. And again, I did a level death benefit. You'll notice the 665 stays level until down here, starting at age 70, it starts to bump up. Well, it's at 672, Ros, because now your cash value is starting to approach the death benefit. And again, tax laws dictate that there is a corridor between how much cash value you can have and how much death benefit you can have. So the software is automatically programmed to up that death benefit as the corridor dictates. So as we're approaching that, that 600,000 death benefit, as far as the cash value, that's why your death benefit starts to increase.
Okay. So now I'm looking
go ahead.
So I'm looking at this, and the cash surrender value is really close to the account value, the net account value. So what is that? How do you interpret that? Would she have to surrender?
Yep, let me tell you how this works. This contract has 10 years of surrender charges. What that means is if she changed her mind and did a complete surrender and walked away from the contract, her cash surrender value is going to be less than her account value for the first 10 years. That's because of surrender charges. Starting in year 11, you'll notice that they're the same number. The cash value equals the account value. What I always tell people is this is a long-term game. We do not want people putting their money into a life insurance contract if they think they're going to need to surrender, in the first 10 years. Now, if she needs to, she needs to. That's not my point. My point is if she's not okay with this being a long-term contract, then this might not be the right play for her, is my point. So 10 years worth of surrender charges, but do keep in mind you do have cash availability through policy loans. So anytime that you have a positive cash surrender value, you have access to borrowing against that contract. So that is something she could do if she needed to. And I know with those 162 plans, again, the cash is important in them. So that's how we'll basically access dollars is through loans and withdrawals.
Okay. And she wouldn't have to, it's not subject to any surrender value by taking out a loan and withdrawal.
A loan and withdrawal, again, it's not subject to surrender value, or it's not subject to surrender charges, but the loan itself cannot exceed your cash surrender value. So let's just argue that she's age 50, which is year 8. And she has $79,000 in cash surrender, but she has $83,000 in account value. She could not come in and take a loan of $83,000. She could only take a loan for a portion of her $79,000, not the $83,000, because they only allow you to borrow what against your cash surrender value, not your full account value.
Okay. Okay, got it.
Yep. So like year one.
That's one of the big difference between the IUL and the whole life. You don't have that surrender, the surrender charges in the whole life.
Correct. Oh, no, there aren't surrender charges in whole life. Absolutely. And so that's why, with whole life contracts, it's hard to, when people try to tell me, well, I want to do a side-by-side comparison of an IUL and a whole life contract. They truly are two different contracts by design. And like Charles just pointed out, that this just happens to be the first thing that that popped out, is this has surrender charges. Whole life does not, but that's again another difference between these two contract types.
Okay.
Now, I do want you to know there's one other way to drive this death benefit down just a little bit further, and that's if we did one of the increasing death benefit options, the options B or C. It would actually give you a lower starting death benefit because it's going to increase over time. Now, I'm going to talk to you just a little bit about the difference between starting with a lower death benefit versus a higher death benefit. One of the things that you want to be mindful of as a salesperson is target premium. And target premium is what your base compensation is off of. And we embed, I'm going to make this a little bit bigger, and I'm going to kind of go down to this lower. See these string numbers in the lower right-hand corner of the page?
Yes.
Anything to the left of this / is your target premium. Keeping in mind the last two numbers are the cents. So $8,173.05 is your target premium. So you might say, okay, what's important about that? And let's just call it $8,100 for sake of me talking. So this $8,100 is your target premium, but you have a client that's paying $12,000. How does this work? You get your base compensation based off of the 8,100 number, not the 12,000. So the 8,100 number is where your full first-year comp is derived from. Anything that she pays above 8,100 is excess comp. Now, why is that important? Because again, it is something that I feel as salespeople, we need to be aware of what we are getting paid on as far as writing these contracts. So that target is based off of your starting death benefit. So $655,020, that death benefit is what dictates this target. The higher the death benefit, the higher the death benefit, the higher the target. The lower the death benefit, the lower the target. It has nothing to do with how much she puts in. It has to do with how much death she is purchasing. So if we lower the death benefit, we can do that. It will lower your target. So instead of an $8,100 target, it would go backward, which again, depending on the situation, might be warranted.
Okay. Mhm.
So how do you make the death benefit lower? I want to show you how we do this. So if we were going to do, instead of option A, I would do option B. And if I do option B, I do that while she's funding the contract, which would be to age 65 in this scenario. I would change the death benefit to option A once she was done funding. Now we're going to just take a quick peek at what this does to the ledger and why your values will now look different. This is going to be a way to drive the death benefit down lower, and the only reason you would do that is if she wanted more cash value. So
Okay.
now, remember before we were at 665 on the death benefit?
Yes.
Now we're at 227.
Okay.
So 227, I promise you, is now as low as we can probably go on a death benefit for this $12,000 a month. We
Okay.
cannot go any lower. We just can't, or we're going to violate guidelines.
12,000
Your
a month
target,
or 1,000 a month?
1,000 a month. Did I say 12,000? Yeah, I meant 12,000 a year. Yeah, 1,000 a month. The target has now went from 8,100 down to a little bit over 2,800, but that makes sense. We cut the target in thirds because the death benefit just went down to about a third of what it was on the option A illustration.
Okay.
But a few things to point out. Do you remember on the other illustration we had a 0 as the cash surrender value in year 1? Well, now
Yes.
we have a positive 5,900. So what we have done is we have taken as little of her money to buy life insurance as humanly possible. The bulk of her premium will be going toward the account value, not because death benefit, the more you buy, the more it costs, right? That makes sense, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, this is no different. Just like if we ran a term quote, for 200,000 versus 600,000 for her, well, which one's going to be more premium? Obviously, the 600,000. This is the same way that the IUL will work. The more death benefit you have, the more internally we are deducting for the cost of insurance. Now, something I think you might be of interest in. I don't recommend this for all clients necessarily because it might be too much analysis for some people. But for learning IUL, we have something called a expense report. And we can go into report selection and we can click expense report and then hit return. And I'm going to go back and preview this illustration again. Now, why do I like showing people the expense report? Because this is going to show 100% where all of her dollars are going for. So I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. And again, this is an optional report. So if she puts in her $1,000 a month, that's a $12,000 outlay. Each year, she'll have an $840 expense charge. She'll have a little over $1,000 that comes out for other expense charges. She'll have cost of insurance of $66, rider charges of $71. I didn't even notice there was a rider on this. Remember I copied it. Did you guys put waiver on this when you were messing with it yesterday?
Yes, I think we did.
Okay,
yeah.
I didn't even notice. Yeah, I didn't even notice. I'm like, oh yeah, there must be a rider on this. At the assumed interest rate, she makes $303 in interest. So at the end of the first year, she has a little over $10,000 in account value. But remember, surrender charges are for the first 10 years. So surrender charge would come out if she surrendered it in the first year, and she'd be left with $5,900. And we do this whole thing year after year after year. You'll notice the premium expense charges stay applicable as long as she's paying premium. The policy expense charges are high in the first 10 years, and then they go down starting in year 11. COIs work opposite. COIs start smaller and increase over time. Why do they increase? Because you're getting older, your cost of insurance is increasing. Rider charges go along with whatever the rider charges are. And then the interest looks like it's growing because, again, she's putting more money in, and because of the power of compounding, her account value is growing. So obviously, as the account value grows, what we charge interest, or what she gets credited interest on, grows as well.
Okay.
I highly recommend a little analysis on this for your own knowledge.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
You bet. The option B thing, again, I'm not telling you how to structure this. I'm just letting you know that option A is an option and option B is an option. You can also do option C. It's not as popular. Option C is also an increasing death benefit where it starts lower and increases over time, but the death benefit increases by the premium paid instead of the account value. So just a little bit different on that.
Okay.
And then let's say you want something in the middle. Let's say after looking at everything I showed you, you were like, well, 600 I understand was the option A, 200 and some was the option B. You could do something like this, and you could start option A at, I'm just pulling this number out because it was in between the two numbers. You could go back to the level and do 500,000. And again, I only picked that number because it was in between 6 and 2. I thought 500,000 was a nice even death benefit. So what this does is gives her a starting death benefit, 500,000. Now you'll notice we can't put in the full 12,000 now all years. Why is that? Because we are hitting guidelines now. So for this amount of death benefit, it would cut the premium off. How do we get rid of that? You do one of two things. You either go back to option B, which option B is still going to be an option, and I have it going back to option A at age 65. Now I'm going to show you this one. So we could start option B at a little bit higher death benefit than the 200,000. Here's an option, but notice that I'm back to my cash surrender value being 0 in year 1 because now I did an option B. It's not the 200,000, it's the 500,000. So we're definitely, I mean, my point is this is when Charles talks about surrender charges being one of the differences between IUL and whole life. This is what I consider to be one of the biggest differences. This is flexible. We get the option of choosing a death benefit within guidelines. And we can manipulate premium. You know, we can play around this premium. This $1,000 a month, you can play around. It doesn't have to be $1,000 a month. These are numbers that are flexible. You can illustrate what is comfortable for her and what you're trying to accomplish through the sale of the contract. So let me quit. I'm going to take a quick drink here. What questions do you have?
The only thing that I have is I just thought about the fact that she mentioned selling the business at age 50. So would we be able to do this to age 50 or 51?
The premium? Are you talking about paying premium?
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. If you want to just pay, I would go back. Now, there's going to be less premium going into this, so I would be going back to my minimum death benefits then, only because if she's only going to pay for 9 years, we want to make sure we're not overstating a death benefit amount for her. So now what I did is I changed it. All I did was I did that same $1,000 a month, but if you'll notice, I went instead of to age 65, I only did it for 9 years, which is age 51. I went back to the option A. I went back to option A just because I start a lot of my illustrations at option A, and now we're at 403.
Okay.
So there you still have a lot of nice cash value growth.
And
so absolutely an option.
All right. So so if I understand this correctly, we're doing this to age 50-ish. So that's the last time she'll have to pay premium, right?
Mhm.
but then the cash value continues to grow.
Right. Now let's when you say has to pay premium, let's talk about that a second. IUL illustrations are based off of a current assumed interest rate that changes depending on how the index performance actually performs for her. We're illustrating 5.64. 5.64 is an illustrated rate only. But if we go down here, now this is just make this a little bit bigger. Here's different indice options. So you have the S&P 500, you have a 1 year, you have a 2 year, you have a Russell 2000. This is an international indice. You have this BNP Paribas, that's another indice. You've got a 5-year average, a 10, a 15, and a 20. Please keep in mind, we do not know how these are going to perform in the future, right? We just know you're going to get somewhere between the floor, which is 0, and the cap, which the cap depends on which index option you choose.
Okay.
So I don't know how this is going to look year after year. The illustration is showing you a 5.64% average rate of return. Now that average is assuming day one and doesn't change as far as the illustration, because we have to pick a rate to illustrate this off of.
Right.
This is constant, 5.64. Is she gonna get 5.64? I have no idea.
Okay.
You would have to talk to her about index choices. Now there is a fixed account. That's what this center one is more based off of, this 3.9%. This shows if she only got 3.9%, she runs out of money at age 100.
Okay.
If she got 5.64, she's got almost $2 million at age 100. Well,
Right.
where's she actually going to land? My guess is somewhere in between. I don't know. But when you say you don't have to pay, now this is going to be, to Charlie about differences, this is another difference now between IUL and whole life. Whole life says if you pay a premium, you get a death benefit, guaranteed. Doesn't matter what returns are, there is a guaranteed component of the premium you pay with whole life. What you don't get is quite the upside potential in cash that the IUL provides. That's why a lot of people pivot to the IULs when it's these cash focused sales. Because you'll notice this guaranteed column, you have, what is that, a 24-year guarantee on the death benefit. That means if she doesn't earn, that means if she earns nothing, she gets a 0% return year after year. Not only that, but we start charging the maximum contract charges that we are legally allowed to. She would run out of cash. She'd run out of coverage at age 67. Now, is that possible? Yeah, it's possible. It's not probable, but it's possible. This is another difference between whole life and IUL.
Okay.
I just want to be completely transparent. That's what this illustration is showing you. It's showing you the worst case scenario. It's showing you more of a fixed account type scenario with the 3.9%. And then it's showing you a 5.64, which, again, if you look at historical values, you'll see just the whole S&P 500 1 year. If you applied the 8.75% cap, the 5-year average is 5.25, the 10-year average is 6.13, the 15-year average is 5.83, and the 20-year average is 6.01. This is historical.
Okay.
So I guess what I'm trying to say is she wouldn't be comfortable with an index strategy of some sort to buy an IUL. You know what I'm getting at? Like it has to be somebody on the risk continuum that understands that you're going to get somewhere between a minimum and a maximum.
Okay. Got it.
Charles, how else
So-
would you say? Do you agree? I mean, well, I know you're a whole life guy, so I always like to see what you think on this.
Yeah, but when you look at it, especially recently, I think 40% of our new cases, maybe 48% of our new cases have been IULs.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, if you're looking for a cash, and I remember, Roz, this has this is going to help because you have the executive bonus, so it's going to help with the taxes. Plus,
Right.
plus when you pull that money out, she's able to pull that money out tax-free at retirement. Now, there's a way you could show like an income coming from that, but I don't know if we have time to go through, the income rider. But it can show she has a 0%. She can have money coming to her at a 0% tax-free every month from this policy.
Yeah, pick a retirement age and I'll quick show you where it's at. If you were going to pick one for her, what would you think for retirement age?
62.
Okay. So what Charles just mentioned is our lifetime income rider, which takes your cash value, turns it into leveling. So at 62, she's got almost 200,000 in account value. If she turned the lifetime income on, it'd be $984 a month back to her for the rest of her life.
Okay.
Based on these numbers.
That's the IUL too.
It is. It is.
How did you turn that on?
I just picked the rider. Yeah, it's a free rider. You just go into riders and you go ahead.
I see it now. Yes.
Yep. And then you could do an alternate age. I'll just do 67 because you can show the benefit. It's just like Social Security, right? The longer you wait, the higher the benefit, death benefit, or not death benefit, higher the benefit can become. Well, same with this. At age 62, it was $9.4. If you wait 5 more years, hypothetically, and your account value grows, so does your lifetime income rider. So.
Okay, and
that's just something. This is a free thing.
And that's based on 10. That's based on 10 years premium, correct?
Correct. Well,
9 years
did
premium.
we do 10? 9 years premium.
9 years premium. Yep. That's not bad.
Yep.
So I just wanted to ask one more thing because I'm not sure if I'm totally clear. So when we go back to the illustration, I see that there are zeros after age 51. So this means that she does
these
not
over
have
here because there's no premium. Because there's no premium.
So that's it. She can just stop paying, and then this will flow. Excuse me. I'm sorry. Okay. Okay, this is cool.
And what you can show her is she can stop paying or not. I mean, we showed that one stopping at age 51. You could show it at 55. I mean, that's what's great about IUL. It's so easy to tweak the premium. So here's one I showed it first paying to 51. Well, now I just did it a few more years. We showed paying 13 years of 9 years. It's just another example of more money in. You can tell the illustration software whatever you want, and it will illustrate it if it can.
Okay. Good stuff.
It's a lot. It's super cool. It's my favorite. I love IUL, but sometimes because it is so flexible, sometimes flexibility can also be daunting, right? Because there's so many choices. It's like, then it almost can become overwhelming. So I definitely am not trying to overwhelm you. I just want you to know that there's a lot of good stuff here.
Okay, great. So were all those illustrations saved in my profile?
I knew you was going to say that.
The last one we did, Roz, is saved. Okay, because remember, I just kept, and this is a good point, I just kept modifying the exact same illustration. So what gets saved is the last one. The last one, yes. So the one that's out there right now is her paying 9 years of premium. stopping at 51. That's the one I saved because it's the last one I did.
So now that's what we did wrong. And so now if you want to do a whole life, you got to go back to the beginning and click new illustration. So that way you don't erase the IUL.
Correct.
And then do the
Yep,
whole life.
don't erase the IULs. Yeah, just go back and highlight her name. And when you highlight, and her name will be highlighted, but you want to click on the bottom gray box and say new, and then go to illustration like Charles said. Because otherwise, if you want to just go look at my illustration that I just did, you can hit modify on it and that will get you into it, or use the copy feature. Remember how I showed you, you can highlight the illustration and just hit copy, and then you'll have a copy of the illustration that you can
I can
edit.
work from.
Exactly,
Okay.
exactly.
Oh, this was great. Thank you so much for your time today.
And we can always call you, Kristi, if we need help, right?
Yeah, you can call me, and I always want to make sure, only because I do a lot of training and I'm on the phone a lot, Ros. If you ever call me and you need help, and it seems to be like you're like, oh, it can't be that hard, like I'm just not knowing what to click.
Yeah.
And you could also hit 0 out of my voicemail, and we have an entire sales team that kind of backs up the internal wholesalers, and they're there staffed for inbound calls. So don't hesitate. If I'm not available and it's just a quick illustration question, the sales team can help as well. Those gals all know how to run these quotes. And Charles, I know you've worked with probably everybody on the sales team at some point, Bonnie.
Sure, yeah. I use everybody, Advanced Market and
Yep.
Colonel, and I use all the help I can get.
But don't you think, Charles, that's one of the nice things about Ameritas is we have a lot of resources?
That's one of the great things of Ameritas. They actually answer the phone, and then there's an 800 number. That's what I covered at my team meeting this morning. That new 800 number, you call them, compensation, whatever question you have, there's somebody dedicated to. If you can't get me, of course, but there's a number you can call, and they actually answer the phone. You don't have to wait 4 days to get an answer. Some carriers is 4 days before, and everyone's pointing fingers. They don't do this. This makes life a lot easier. Call, get an answer, and you can go hop on the call with a client and take it from there. It's one of the great things. All right.
Great. Thank you.
Good deal.
This was very helpful.
Well, I'm going to I appreciate you joining us again. I do need to run. For some reason, like I said, I got kind of booked up with afternoon calls, so I need to run. But I will, be around if you have other questions, Ros. Otherwise, you're in good hands with Charles. That's for sure.